Remember Monica Lewinsky? Of course you do. How could anyone forget the young woman whose name became a global punchline overnight, whose face was plastered across every television screen, every newspaper front page, and every late-night comedy sketch at the close of the 1990s? Because when the news broke in 1998 that she had been involved in a scandal with then-President Bill Clinton, Monica's life as a private person ended instantly, and what followed was not just a media firestorm, but a cultural reckoning wrapped in mockery, shame, and exploitation, as she became the target of everything from political commentary to high school jokes, from think pieces to cruel Halloween costumes. And while the camera zoomed in and comedians laughed, few stopped to ask how a 22-year-old woman barely out of college, trying to find her footing in the world, was supposed to survive being the most humiliated woman in modern American history. And yet survive she did, but not in the way people expected, because while some assumed she would vanish forever, and others expected her to cash in on her infamy with book deals, TV specials, and talk show appearances, Monica instead walked a quieter, more difficult path. And yes, there were offers. And yes, she took some, like the $1 million interview and the six-figure book advance, but the money didn't last long. And not because she squandered it, but because legal fees, security costs, basic living expenses, and the fact that most employers wouldn't hire her made rebuilding a life extremely difficult. And while others have turned lesser scandals into reality TV empires and fashion brands, Monica chose dignity over dollars, privacy over publicity. And while it may have cost her financially, it allowed her to slowly, painfully reclaim her name on her own terms, because despite the fame, despite the notoriety, despite being known by name in every household across the country, Monica's net worth at 51 is not what you'd expect. It's reportedly around $1.5 million, a modest sum considering her global recognition, and that number shocks people not because it's low by average standards, but because it's so wildly out of sync with how visible her name has been for decades. And that disconnect tells you everything you need to know about the price of infamy, because being famous for the wrong reasons doesn't always come with a payout. It often comes with pain. And while Monica could have taken every check thrown her way, she instead chose the slow, lonely, and often unforgiving path of personal growth, moving overseas, earning a master's degree in social psychology from the London School of Economics, and trying to find work that didn't ask her to exploit her trauma or retell her story just to stay relevant. And for years she stayed quiet, mostly absent from public life, watching the world move on, watching other scandals unfold, watching how the internet grew crueler and faster, how cancel culture and viral shame became a currency of their own. And it wasn't until years later, in a different cultural moment, that she began to speak again, not to retell the scandal, but to talk about shame, trauma, and the very real, very human cost of being publicly mocked. Because Monica Lewinsky wasn't just the first woman to be globally slut-shamed, as she was the first to survive it in the digital age. And when she stepped back into the spotlight, it wasn't with a product line or a memoir tour, it was with a TED Talk, a voice that trembled but never broke, a story that resonated with a new generation of women, activists, and survivors who finally understood that her name should never have been a joke to begin with. And now, Monica is not just a name from a scandal, she's a writer, an advocate, a speaker, and a cultural figure who uses her story to protect others from the same fate. And that journey, the one from shame to survival to self-empowerment, isn't measured in millions of dollars, but in millions of people who've seen her and felt seen by her, who've heard her speak and found the courage to stand up for themselves. And so while the internet might gasp when they hear her net worth at 51 isn't what they expected, the truth is that Monica Lewinsky's value can't be measured in dollars, because what she built wasn't a brand, but a life of meaning. And her legacy isn't about what she lost, it's about what she gave back. And that's what really shocks you. And as the years unfolded and the world changed and Monica Lewinsky moved from infamous figure to unexpected icon, something remarkable began to happen. Something subtle at first but undeniable over time. Her name, once whispered in cruelty and gossiped in late-night comedy routines, began to be spoken with respect, curiosity, and even admiration. Because as society started confronting its own mistakes, its obsession with scandal, its willingness to shame women while excusing powerful men, more people began to see that Monica hadn't been a willing participant in history's most infamous affair, but a young woman caught in a vortex of politics, media frenzy, and a global appetite for humiliation. And as documentaries, podcasts, essays, and dramatizations began to revisit the 1990s through a modern lens, they began to uncover not just the details of what happened, but the sheer imbalance of how she was treated compared to the man who held all the power. And when Impeachment, American Crime Story aired, starring Beanie Feldstein as Monica, it wasn't just a rehash of scandal, it was a reckoning, a reframe, a retelling with empathy and depth that gave viewers something they never got in 1998, Monica's side of the story, told with nuance, pain, and dignity. And what shocked audiences wasn't just the injustice of how she'd been, was how much strength it had taken for her to survive it, and more than that, to keep showing up, to not disappear. to not grow bitter, to instead take her place in the world as a woman who turned her most painful chapter into a mission to help others. And her work as an anti-bullying activist, as a speaker on shame, and as a writer who examines the intersections of power and vulnerability, has quietly redefined her role in American history. Because now, when college students study media ethics, they study how Monica Lewinsky was treated. When social media campaigns focus on online cruelty, her voice is among the first they listen to. And when public figures are humiliated online, many quote Monica's TED Talk, her writings, or her interviews, because she's no longer just a former intern. She's a case study in survival and grace under pressure, a woman who has endured more public humiliation than almost anyone and emerged not unscarred but unbroken. And while others may have turned their trauma into fame and fortune, Monica never exploited herself that way, never let her lowest moment become her whole identity, never slapped her name on a clothing line or cashed in on outrage. And so while her net worth remains surprisingly modest, still hovering around $1 to $1.5 million at age 51, it stands not as a symbol of what she lost, but as proof of what she refused to become. Because Monica Lewinsky could have been a tabloid queen, a talking head, a reality show staple, but she chose integrity over attention, substance over spectacle, and meaning over millions. And that choice, that refusal to play the fame game the way others expected her to, may not have made her rich, but it made her valuable in a way that can't be calculated. Because today, in a world where scandals come and go, where people are canceled and commodified in the same breath, Monica remains a rare figure, someone who was destroyed by public judgment, yet never lost her humanity, someone who was mocked, memed, and maligned, yet never returned cruelty with cruelty, someone who was told she'd never be more than a footnote, and yet rewrote her place in history with resilience, compassion, and truth. And that is what truly shocks people, not just that her bank account doesn't match her fame, but that she walked through fire, stood through decades of ridicule, and came out the other side without selling her soul. And now, at 51, Monica Lewinsky is not just remembered, she is revered, not just for what she endured, but for how she chose to carry it.